Good morning and welcome to Rideau Hall. As the ceremony is about to begin, I would like to inform you that our official photographer will be taking photos which will be shared in the coming days. Therefore, I would ask that you please refrain from taking pictures throughout the ceremony. As a reminder, please ensure that your cell phones are turned to silent mode. Thank you. Bonjour et soyez les bienvenus à Rideau Hall. Avant de commencer la cérémonie, j'aimerais vous informer que notre photographe officiel prendra des photos lors de l'événement et qu'elles vous seront partagées dans les jours à venir. Par conséquent, je vous demanderai de ne pas prendre de photos pendant la cérémonie. J'aimerais également vous rappeler d'éteindre la sonnerie de vos téléphones cellulaires. Merci. The ceremony will now begin with the entrance of the Clerk of the Privy Council and Secretary to the Cabinet, John Hannaford, the Secretary to the Governor-General, Ken McKillop, and the Assistant Clerk of the Privy Council, Jana Rinaldi. La cérémonie débutera maintenant avec l'arrivée du greffier du Conseil privé et secrétaire du cabinet, John Hannaford, du secrétaire de la gouverneure générale, Ken McKillop, et de la greffière adjointe du Conseil privé, Jana Rinaldi.
Good morning. Bonjour. To begin today's swearing-in ceremony, I invite you to please rise to welcome the ministers, ministers-designate, the Prime Minister-designate, and their Excellencies, the Governor-General of Canada, and Mr. Whit Fraser. Pour débuter la cérémonie, veuillez vous lever pour accueillir les ministres désignés, le Premier ministre désigné, et leurs Excellences, le Gouverneur général du Canada et Mr. Whit Fraser. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir. Merci. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken McKillop, and I'm the Secretary to the Governor-General. I would like to welcome everybody to Rideau Hall today for the swearing-in of the 24th Prime Minister of Canada and the 30th Canadian Ministry. I'd like to take a moment to share with you a traditional activity that was initiated just prior to the beginning of the ceremony, the lighting of the hulik, a traditional Inuit lamp. This lamp is used in the north to bring light and warmth to the home. We light the hulik to mark important events such as today's ceremony. And we are grateful for the presence of Elder Canon Iga Atakutsiak from Arctic Bay, who lit the hulik and will remain and maintain its light and warmth throughout the ceremony. Nakumik. J'aimerais maintenant inviter l'aîné algonquin Verna McGregor à prononcer ces mots de bienvenue.
Kwe kakina. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everybody. Very honored to be here today, and I'd like to welcome you to our traditional unceded lands here, and I'm very honored, Your Excellency, for the invitation. I do a many openings for constituents in Ottawa here, but I always talk about the significance here because this is so special for us as Algonquin. We're known as the Mamaninawak, the nomads, and we're known for the birch bark canoe. And we would meet here in the summer prior to contact to talk about what's going on the land. But this confluence here is very special because it represents balance of the four directions, the four seasons, the four stages of your life. And so, and I find it interesting that Parliament and Rideau Hall and all the government headquarters are located here, because I think this is special too as well for leadership. And I'm honoring the new leader today too as well. And I was thinking about you today. I said it's like the geese, and you have the head, the person at the head, Ganiganich, and they face the head waters. And I think we're in for always challenges, but even more so today. So I'm going to honor you and all of you with a little opening prayer and thanking everybody. And so I say, miigwech, onjeni gashkito, jama maundose konshe nongo, mwame kakina niganich. Shwen mishnoni nabiges, miigwech onje kakina gagishen ta nonje mam dege, nindekimenon. Shkaiki kwejin kaso nindekimenon. We don't kakina pamazaje konje nagadawam dan kakina guchin in the kimenon. Mam de genishna be ki. Megwech onje kakina ete kijigo. Kizis to be kizis a shichanungshak. We don't kananokamasnan onje nagadawam dan kakina guchia nibi. A shichnimashom sanan. Kizis onje nagadawam dan kakina guchia. Pamazajik the niswa gonshe. Megwech onje na sewen. Kaki mijin. Chimino pamadzian onje. We do kwa kakinan and Jinoan Daganak, Nimashom Sinan, the Gokmisnan, a Shichnidon Denis, Oje, non Gomonje, the Bashka Dagama, Kamashe Denis, Wagonje, a Shich Kakinan and Jinoan Daganak, and Wesi Sak, Mitigog, Mijaski, Mashkiki, Kakina Gagijendan. Kacheshquat Negue de Seaman, Kego Gajeman, Doshitkan, and Ojgush Negue de Seaman, we do kwa Kakina, Mam de Gay, we wissen a jig, the Mogas a jig, Akas a jig, Kaye, we me God with jig, non com Chuana Ki watch, Chimino Pamadzu watch. Miigwech. I say miigwech 4 times to honor again the 4 directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 stages of our lives. We come from spirit and we return back to spirit. We come from the earth, we return back to the earth. And in my prayer, what I'm saying is, I'm thanking everybody to coming together here. And always a reminder too, as well, to look after the earth. Because again, one of the teachings is that we were all given the original instructions to look after the earth, because we all share the earth, we share the water, we share the air, and the fire of the sun, our internal fires. So that's why, again, Ganiganich, the one in front, it has a big responsibility. And that's why we're having this ceremony today. So, miigwech everybody, and have a good day. Merci. Merci à tous.
Thank you, Elder McGregor. Merci, Annie McGregor. Mr. John Hannaford, the Clerk of the Privy Council and the Secretary to the Cabinet, will now seek the Governor-General's consent for the administration of the Oath of Allegiance, the Privy Councillor's Oath, and the Oath of Office to the Prime Minister-Designate.
Excellency, the Prime Minister-Designate has accepted your invitation to form a new government and is prepared to be sworn in. Excellence, le Premier Ministre-Désigné a accepté votre invitation de former le gouvernement et est disposé à servir le serment.
The Prime Minister-Designate will please come forward to be sworn in. Le Premier Ministre désigné est prié de s'avancer pour prêter serment. Mr. Mark Carney. Mr. Mark Carney.
Moi, Mark Carney, je jure fidélité et sincère allégeance à Sa Majesté le roi Charles III, roi du Canada, à ses héritiers et successeurs. I, Mark Carney, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors. Moi, Mark Carney, je jure solennellement et sincèrement que j'agirai en fidèle et loyal serviteur de Sa Majesté le roi Charles III en ma qualité de membre du Conseil privé de Sa Majesté pour le Canada. J'exprimerai fidèlement, honnêtement et en toute vérité mon sentiment et mon opinion sur toute chose traitée, débattue et résolue en Conseil. Je tiendrai secret tout ce qui me confie ou révélé en cette qualité, ou tout ce dont il sera traité secrètement en Conseil. J'agirai en toutes circonstances comme il convient à une fidèle et loyale serviteur de Sa Majesté. I, Mark Carney, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be a true and faithful servant to His Majesty King Charles III as a member of His Majesty's Privy Council for Canada. I will, in all things, to be treated, debated, and resolved in Privy Council, faithfully, honestly, and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that shall be secretly treated of in council. Generally, in all things I shall do as a faithful and true servant ought to do for His Majesty. Moi, Mark Carney, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'écouterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de Premier ministre. I, Mark Carney, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister and the Governor-General and the Clerk of the Privy Council are signing the oath books to formally witness the swearing-in of the Prime Minister, but they're also signing the instruments of advice nominating the new Canadian ministry. Congratulations, Prime Minister. Et maintenant que la gouverneure générale a signifié son approbation, nous procéderons à l'assermentation du 30e Conseil des ministres canadiens. The ministers and ministers designate will please come forward to be sworn in. Les ministres et les ministres désignés sont priés de s'avancer pour prêter serment. L'honorable Dominique Leblanc, ministre du Commerce international et des Affaires intergouvernementales et président du Conseil privé du roi pour le Canada, the Honourable Dominique Leblanc, Minister of International Trade and Intergovernmental Affairs and President of the King's Privy Council for Canada.
Moi, Dominique Leblanc, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre du Commerce international et des Affaires intergouvernementales et président du Conseil privé du roi pour le Canada. I, Dominic LeBlanc, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of International Trade and Intergovernmental Affairs and President of the King's Privy Council for Canada.
L'honorable Mélanie Joly, ministre des Affaires étrangères et du Développement international, n'est pas en mesure de se joindre à nous et sera assermentée prochainement cet après-midi. The Honorable Mélanie Joly, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Development, is unable to join us this morning, but will be sworn in at a later time this afternoon. Maintenant, l'honorable François-Philippe Champagne, ministre des Finances. The Honorable François-Philippe Champagne, Minister of Finance.
Moi, François-Philippe Champagne, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Finances. I, François-Philippe Champagne, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Finance. Thank you. Prime Minister.
There it is. The Honorable Indira Anita Anand, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. Honorable Indira Anita Anand, Ministre de l'Innovation, des Sciences et l'Industrie.
I, Indira Anita Anand, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Innovation, Science, and Industry. Moi, Indira Anita Anand, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Innovation, des Sciences et de l'Industrie.
The Honourable William Sterling Blair, Minister of National Defence. L'Honourable William Sterling Blair, Ministre de la Défense nationale.
I, William Sterling Blair, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of National Defence. Thank you, John.
The Honourable Patty Hajdu, Minister of Indigenous Services. L'Honourable Patty Hajdu, Ministre des Services des Autochtones.
I, Patricia Hajdu, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Indigenous Services. Moi, Patricia Hajdu, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de service aux Autochtones.
The Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. L'Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson, Ministre de l'Énergie et des Ressources naturelles.
I, Jonathan Wilkinson, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Moi, Jonathan Wilkinson, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, J'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Énergie et des Ressources naturelles.
L'Honorable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, Président du Conseil du Trésor. The Honorable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, President of the Treasury Board.
Moi, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs qui m'attireraient des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de présidente du Conseil du Trésor. I, Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skills and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as President of the Treasury Board.
L'Honorable Stephen Guilbeault, ministre de la Culture et de l'Identité canadienne, Parc Canada et lieutenant du Québec. The Honorable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity, Parks Canada and the Quebec Lieutenant.
Moi, Stephen Guilbeault, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Culture et de l'Identité canadienne, Parc Canada et lieutenant du Québec. I, Stephen Guilbeault, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Canadian Culture and Identity, Parks Canada, and Quebec Lieutenant. Thank you. Merci, John.
The Honorable Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. L'Honorable Chrystia Freeland, Ministre des Transports et du Commerce intérieur.
I, Chrystia Freeland, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Transport and Internal Trade. Moi, Chrystia Freeland, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, J'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Transports et du Commerce intérieur.
The Honourable Kamal Khera, Minister of Health. Honorable Kamal Khera, Ministre de la Santé.
I, Kamal Khera, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Health.
The Honourable Gary Anandasangri, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada and Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs. Honorable Gary Anandasangri, Ministre de la Justice et le Procureur général du Canada et le Ministre des Relations couronnes autochtones et des Affaires du Nord.
I, Gary Anandasangri, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada and Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs. As Minister of Justice, I will see that the administration of public affairs is in accordance with the law. As Attorney General of Canada, I will uphold the Constitution, the rule of law, and the independence of the judiciary and of the prosecutorial function. Moi, Gary Anandasangri, je promets et jure, solemnement et sincèrement, comme mieux de ma compétence et ma conscience, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement le pouvoir et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Justice et procureur général du Canada et ministre des Relations couronnes autochtones et des Affaires du Nord. En tant que ministre de Justice, je veillerai au respect de la loi dans l'administration des affaires publiques. En tant que procureur général du Canada, je ferai respecter la Constitution, le prometteur de droit et l'indépendance de la magistrature et de la fonction de poursuite.
The Honorable Richie Valdez, Chief Government Whip. L'Honorable Richie Valdez, Whip du chef du gouvernement.
I, Richie Valdez, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Chief Government Whip. Moi, Richie Valdez, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement que, mieux de ma compétence et ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de whip en chef du gouvernement.
L'Honorable Stephen Garrett McKinnon, Ministre de l'Emploi et des Familles. The Honorable Stephen Garrett McKinnon, Minister of Jobs and Families.
Moi, Stephen Garrett McKinnon, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Emploi et des Familles. I, Stephen Garrett McKinnon, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Jobs and Families.
L'Honorable David Joseph McGuinty, Ministre de la Sécurité publique et de la Protection civile. The Honorable David Joseph McGuinty, Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Moi, David Joseph McGuinty, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de la Sécurité publique et de la Protection civile. I, David Joseph McGuinty, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and the trusts reposed in me as Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Terry Duguid, Minister of Environment and Climate Change. L'honorable Terry Duguid, Ministre de l'Environnement, des Climats, Changement climatique.
I, Terry Gordon Duguid, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Moi, Terry Gordon Duguid, je promets et jure solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Environnement et du Changement climatique.
The Honourable Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. L'honorable Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Ministre du Logement, de l'Infrastructure et des Collectivités.
I, Nathaniel Erskine Smith, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Housing, Infrastructure, and Communities.
L'honorable Rachel Bendayen, Minister de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés et de la Citoyenneté. The Honourable Rachel Bendayen, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Moi, Rachel Bendayan, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés et de la Citoyenneté. I, Rachel Bendayan, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship.
L'honorable Élisabeth Brière, ministre des Anciens combattants et des ministres responsables de l'Agence de revenus du Canada. The Honorable Elizabeth Brière, Minister of Veterans Affairs and Minister responsible for the Canadian Revenue Agency.
Moi, Élisabeth Brière, je promets et déclare solennellement et sincèrement qu'au mieux de ma compétence et de ma connaissance, j'exécuterai loyalement et fidèlement les pouvoirs et je m'acquitterai des responsabilités qui m'ont été confiées en qualité de ministre des Anciens combattants et ministre responsable de l'Agence du revenu du Canada. I, Elizabeth Brière, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Veterans Affairs and Minister responsible for the Canada Revenue Agency.
The Honourable Joanne Thompson, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard. L'Honorable Joanne Thompson, Ministre des Pêches, des Océans et la Garde côtière canadienne.
I, Joanne Thompson, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Ariel Kayabaga, Leader of the Government in the House of Commons and Minister of Democratic Institutions. Ariel Kayabaga, Leader du gouvernement dans la Chambre des communes et Ministre de l'Institution démocratique.
I, Ariel Kayabaga, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III.
This is the primary audio circuit.
Had to leave here to be sworn in, remain in her post, and she's become a friend in the last few weeks as we worked together. I knew her a little bit before, but gotten to know her now, obviously, in this role. They did a great job of hosting it, a beautiful place. And so we're grateful to them. I think we have a very strong statement from the G7. Hopefully you've gotten that by now and have been able to see it. A very strong statement on a number of issues of mutual concern. We touched those topics. It was a really good engagement, and obviously there'll be some follow-up. And it sort of sets up for the leaders meeting later on this year. And we hope that'll be equally productive. But we felt really good about the statement, worked hard on it. I think it reflects our points on a number of topics. And I would just say the one takeaway, you're going to ask me questions about things that are going on in different bilateral relationships and so forth. But I think what's important, and something I said at the outset, which everybody agreed with, is that we're not going to allow the things we disagree on, and we'll disagree on things, to keep us from working closely on the things we agree on. And there are a lot of those. And hopefully the statement reflects that, and our actions will reflect that. And so we feel really good about it. The other announcement, and I think that's already reflected in the President's statements, there was what we felt was a very positive and productive engagement yesterday with President Putin and Special Envoy Witkoff. Obviously, he is on his way back. He should be back, and hopefully we'll convene this weekend. We'll examine the Russian position more closely and determine, the President will then determine what the next steps are. Suffice it to say, I think there is reason to be cautiously optimistic, but by the same token, we continue to recognize this is a difficult and complex situation. It will not be easy, it will not be simple, but we certainly feel like we're at least some steps closer to ending this war and bringing peace, but it's still a long journey. It's a journey of many steps. So, but this is positive momentum. Obviously, we'll see what Russia and others are willing to do. It's not just Russia. Obviously, it has to be things acceptable to Ukraine. But it's been a good week in that front, but there's a lot of work that remains to be done. But, you know, there's reason to be cautiously and optimistic, but we'll know more once Special Envoy Witkoff, Ambassador Witkoff returns, and we have a chance to all convene and talk about it. And obviously, the President is the ultimate decider on next steps for the United States. Okay.
Mr. Secretary, do you trust Putin?
I think it's an irrelevant question. I think in foreign policy, it's not about trusting, it's about action. It's about things that you do. So in the end, on something like this, you can't just say you want peace, you have to do peace. And that's true for both sides in any conflict. So in any war and in any engagement. So I think ultimately, all these things, I would just encourage you guys, if we're going to be serious about foreign policy, to sort of navigate away from some of this is not a reality show, this is not about personalities, this is very simple. You either do things or you don't. There are things you are doing and things you're not doing. And that's what foreign policy is driven by, and that's how our decisions should be driven by. So unfortunately, in foreign policy, oftentimes you will have to work with, I'm not talking about President Putin in particular, I'm talking about generally, you will have to work with people you don't like in foreign policy. And oftentimes, you will have disagreements with people you like. Sometimes you will have to figure out how to work together with nations that are not aligned with you on most issues. And in some other cases, you may find yourself unaligned on an issue with a nation that you work with very closely on a bunch of other things. That's not just now true today. That has been true throughout the history of mankind and certainly the relations between nation states. So I think it's important. I get there's this temptation to cover foreign policy the way we cover domestic policy and the way we cover other things in our society. But foreign policy is about nation states pursuing what they have interpreted to be in their national interest. And balancing that is what the art of diplomacy and the work of foreign policy is all about. And so we need to sort of be mature and open-eyed and realistic without losing our idealism, without losing, you know, what we hope the world will look like and want to shape it and be a part of. But by the same token, you know, we have to make pragmatic decisions every single day, and that's not true today. That's always been true. Always.
Secretary, do you have any top lines from Mr. Witkoff? This was a late meeting. It went hours long. Is there anything that he shared? And then when you do examine the Russian position, that the comments by President Putin were quite convoluted and tough to decipher. I wonder if you think that he's playing for time.
Well, I think you're not going to, this is not something that's going to play out in press conferences. As I stand at a press conference. But this is, you know, these, again, I go back to the point I just made. You know, when you want, if you think about the most recent example of ceasefire negotiations, which was what happened in Gaza and with Israel and so forth, yeah, there were newspaper and there were articles and there was news stories about it, but ultimately you found out what the results were after the fact. And in the meantime, you saw public statements from different sides in regards to what they were going to do. I think this will be no different. So certainly, we're not going to make our foreign policy decisions on the basis of what a leader simply says at a press conference or somebody puts up on a social media post because you're some blogger close to the Kremlin or something like that. And likewise, I don't think they're going to do that either. So I would just say that this is going to play out the way things of this nature and caliber have traditionally and normally play out, and that is with the leaders of the countries involved speaking, not in front of the cameras, not in front of the media, but in these negotiations that happen and in these talks that happen. So I'm not going to comment on what President Putin said, other than he said he agreed with it in concept. So,
with lots of reservations.
Well, again, he said that at a press conference. As I said, and I go back to the phrase I used earlier, I think there is reason for cautious optimism that something good could come of this. Obviously, we're going to wait for Ambassador Witkoff to return. He's not back yet. We're going to reconvene. Obviously, I spoke to him late last night. He spoke to the President well before that. You may have spoken to other members of our team. I've been here. But ultimately, you know, we're going to reconvene, and the president will have options available to him, and decisions will be made after that. But I don't want to speculate or characterize anything beyond what I've just said until we have had a chance to sit down with Ambassador Woodcock, who's still overseas and in travel.
Can I just follow up on that point then, Mr. Secretary, because when on the way here, you said you were seeking an unconditional acceptance. I mean, clearly Mr. Putin is adding a whole series of conditions, and also the President says this should be...
Well, how do you know he's adding conditions?
From what he said publicly.
Well, I go back to the point I made. Let's let this thing play through, okay? And then let's figure out what... Let me at least talk to... Let's the team get together on the state side of this and talk to Ambassador Woodcock and go through some of this. Again, we're not going to be involved in this process where I'm being asked to you know, stake a position of U.S. policy on the basis of what someone said at a press conference yesterday. So we're going to work through this thing in a normal, sane fashion. We'll figure out where we are based on what I know at this moment with my conversation with Ambassador Woodcock. He's not here yet. I feel like there's reason for cautious optimism. I think the President shared that today in his Truth Social post. But there's a lot of work. No, I have never told anybody that this is going to be easy, fast, simple, slam dunk. It'll be hard, but it's important work. We are a better place today, I hope, I believe, we have reason to believe, than we were a week ago. But we still have a long ways to go. It could come together pretty quickly if everyone aligns, but I don't know how aligned we are yet. That's what we're about to find out. So cautious optimism is about the best phraseology I could use at this moment. Based on what we know, we're going to keep working on it.
Mr. Secretary, the statement that you...
I'll get to everybody.
But it's just the fundamental element of the President's proposal was it should be an immediate ceasefire.
Sure,
So
and that's the proposal.
How long does Putin have?
Well, in terms of long for what?
How long does... Because there are those who say he's playing for time, that this is adding conditions, adding...
Well, this war's been going on for 3 years. So I think the question, and with no end in sight at this point, without this intervention by President Trump. So I think the question is, you know, the fundamental question really is not how long. I think the question is, are we actually moving towards a ceasefire, or is this a delay tactic? I'm not going to answer that because I can't characterize that for you right now. I think we'll know sooner rather than later, and a lot of that will be based on the conversation Ambassador Woodcock had yesterday and other factors that are in play. But we're not there yet, but we will get there. We want it to be, the President wanted it to be yesterday and the day before. But we're certainly at least talking about peace for the first time in 3 years. Now we'll have to figure out how close we truly are, and that's going to take some time. And you know, Woodcock's not here yet, so here meaning stateside.
Mr. Secretary, the joint statement says that there is a need for robust and credible security arrangements for Ukraine. How would you define that based on your conversations here at the G7? What are robust and credible security arrangements?
Well, that's to be determined by the negotiations. Here's what I want to encourage everybody to do. Bifurcate two things, okay? The ceasefire and the conditions for everybody to stop shooting at each other. What will it take to get everybody to stop shooting at each other? And then moving to a negotiating table on settling the war with finality. Two separate processes. Process number one is, what do we need from both sides in order to stop the shooting and the fighting, so that you can get to a negotiating table? That's the second phase. As part of that second phase, there will obviously be, every country in the world has a right to security, has a right to defend itself, has a right to protect its territory. That will have to be part of that conversation. And it will have to be something that involves not simply the views of the United States, but other countries that are involved in that. I've repeated this over and over again. The European Union has imposed significant sanctions on the Russian Federation and on individuals inside of Russia. So they will have to be consulted, and they'll have to be engaged in this process and so forth. So let's not predetermine or start putting everything ahead of itself here. The process of what long-term security means for Ukraine, that will be something that Ukraine will obviously have to agree with, and that will have to be worked through as part of that second phase. But we can't get to the second phase till we get through the first phase. We think it's very difficult to negotiate lasting peace and security in the midst of a all-out war. And so we have to try to lower that so that it makes it possible to move to phase two of this.
Mr. Secretary, the statement that you issued a little while ago also notes that the G7 discussed ways to impose costs on Russia should that become necessary, to include caps on oil prices, additional support for Ukraine using seized sovereign Russian assets. Was there, but it said it discussed them, you didn't agree on them. Is there any agreement within the G7 on these particular measures, just what they should be, in what order, and what might trigger them, and why did you discuss them if you're so cautiously optimistic?
Well, first of all, they were raised because the Europeans have their own set of sanctions and new ones they would like to impose. And certainly the United States is not a member of the EU. We don't have a vote at the EU. And so whatever they determine and decide to do, we can't control it. They ask us for our input, we'll give it to them, but that's not what's happening right now. So yes, it was discussed. As far as U.S. sanctions are concerned, the President's made clear, the President on 2 occasions in the past week has reminded everybody that the U.S. has these options available to it, but he doesn't want to do that right now because he's in the hopes of attracting people, both sides, to a process where we can negotiate peace. And I'll leave it at that. There really is nothing to add to that at this point.
Mr. Secretary,
Go ahead. Hold on one second. Yes.
Reaffirmed unwavering support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, which has been largely absent in various U.S. statements since January 20th. What led you to subscribe to this time?
But that's not a change in public policy. The United States has never said that Russia, I've never heard President Trump say that Russia has a right to take all of Ukraine and do whatever they want there. So that's not inconsistent with that statement. That is separate from the issue we face today. And that is that as it stands today, there is a war going on that has no military solution to it. Neither Russia nor Ukraine can achieve its maximalist military aims. The only way to end this war is through a process of negotiations. Negotiations, be it in business, in commerce, or in geopolitics, involves both sides giving something, both sides making concessions. That's just obvious. I'm not saying, I don't think that should be sort of a news-making statement. That's the reality of any conversations that exist in order to end wars, is that there has to be some level of concessions. What those concessions are remains to be seen. That'll have to be part of the negotiation. But it's not going to be helpful to enter into those negotiations making blanket statements that may give an excuse for one side or the other not to participate in it. So we'll have to get to that stage where these things are discussed, and ultimately both sides, whatever happens, both sides will have to agree to it. And that's true of any negotiation when you're trying to end a war.
Mr. Secretary, understanding your point about this not being a reality show or personalities, Ukraine or anything else for that matter, your boss has, shall we say, a rather strong personality. And I'm wondering, in light of that and his repeated comments about Canada becoming, or should be, the 51st state, the whole tariff situation, which intensified as we were on our way here after the big announcement in Jeddah, did that complicate your discussions at all? Was it?
Never came up once. I mean, obviously with the foreign minister of Canada it has, but it was not a topic, it was not on our agenda. I told you that would not be discussed. Tariffs were. Yeah. So let me explain on the tariffs. This is important for everybody to understand. This keeps being characterized as a hostile move against our allies. These are global tariffs on steel, on aluminum, on autos, on semiconductors. Eventually, the president stated this, and then a global, in April, the intention to put tariffs, assuming that the study comes back and so forth. But what they've discussed is a global reciprocal tariff. Understand what that means. That means basically whatever some country charges us, that's what we're going to charge them. The goal the president has made very clear is he wants to reset the baseline of international trade, which he believes, and I agree, is unfair to the United States. This is not meant as a hostile move against Japan or Germany or anybody else. This is not about, this is about balancing and fairness in trade. So he wants to reset the baseline, and once that baseline is reset, then you can enter into bilateral negotiations with individual countries about changes that can be made to our trade, our bilateral trade, so that it's fair for both sides. That's his goal. In his first administration, the president did tariffs as well. What he was disturbed by in hindsight is the fact that they included a bunch of exemptions that basically made them meaningless. And so what he wants to get back to is basically fairness in trade. It's as simple as that. Okay. We want to charge other countries what they charge us. And then ultimately, once the baseline is reset, and then in addition to that, there are industries that are critical to the United States and to our domestic security and our future. And he's identified them: steel, aluminum, semiconductors, automobiles. These are things that we believe are in our interest to have a domestic capacity, and we have to protect these industries from what we feel is subsidization and unfair competition from abroad. This is not meant to be hostile towards anybody. It is meant to be friendly and supportive of our of our national interest as a country. Once the baseline of trade is reset in a way that's fair and equitable, then we can engage in the process of bilateral negotiations with individual countries, including our allies, to set up a more sustainable and fair long-term trade arrangement between our respective countries.
So, Mr. Secretary, the President and your meeting with Foreign Minister Joby, do you understand why the Canadians are taking such umbrage at these comments coming from the President? Is that something?
The Canadian government has made their position, how they feel about it, clear. The President has made his argument as to why he thinks Canada would be better off joining the United States for economic purposes. There's a disagreement between the President's position and the position of the Canadian